The Grand Chamber of Justice loomed over New Saturn's crystalline skyline, its twisted spires of iridescent metal reaching toward the stars like accusatory fingers. Inside, James Harrison adjusted his formal diplomatic uniform and tried to ignore the whispers of 200 alien species discussing his impending doom. The chamber's atmospheric processors hummed as they maintained the delicate balance of different atmospheric requirements for the assembled delegates, creating an oddly fitting background noise for what many were calling the trial of the century. "All rise for Magistrate Vorthak of the Seventh Circuit," announced the bailiff, a towering Andromedian whose crystalline form shifted colors with each word. Harrison stood, his movements deliberate and calm despite the gravity of his situation. As Earth's deputy ambassador to the Galactic Coalition, he'd faced his share of diplomatic challenges, but being accused of violating the Coalition's most sacred laws was something else entirely. The charge, illegal technology transfer to a pre-spaceflight species, the Nixians, who had been facing extinction from their dying sun. Magistrate Vorthak entered the chamber, her gelatinous form pulsing with the traditional colors of judicial authority, deep purple shot through with streaks of gold. The four environmental fields surrounding her containment pod hummed in perfect harmony, maintaining the precise conditions her species required. "The Coalition brings forth charges against James Harrison of Earth," Vorthak's translated voice resonated through the chamber. "How does the accused plead?" Before Harrison could speak, his defense attorney rose. Kylxna of the Centaurian Legal Guild was a sight to behold, 3 meters of sleek, dark exoskeleton crowned with sensory fronds that gleamed with neural activity. She had taken his case when every other attorney in the Coalition had refused. "Your Honor," Kylxna's translator rendered her clicks and whistles into standard Coalition speech. Before entering a plea, the defense moves to question the jurisdiction of this court under Article 7, subsection 12 of the Coalition Charter. A murmur rippled through the assembled aliens. In the prosecution section, Senior Prosecutor Dexthan Scales flushed an angry red. The Arcturian prosecutor had built his reputation on cases involving technology violations, and Harrison could practically see him calculating how to counter this unexpected opening move. "Explain," Vorthak commanded, her form swirling with curiosity. "The Charter specifically states that technology transfer violations must involve a recognized species within Coalition space," Kylxna continued. "The Nixians were neither recognized nor within Coalition boundaries when my client acted." Harrison kept his face neutral, but internally he smiled. This was why he'd chosen Kylxna. She understood that sometimes the best defense wasn't arguing innocence, but questioning whether the law applied at all. Dex then surged to his feet, his scales now practically glowing. "The Nixian solar system falls within the Coalition's sphere of influence. This is clearly established by the Rigel Accords of Dash." "The Rigel Accords," Harrison suddenly spoke, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber, "which Earth never signed, having not joined the Coalition until 3 standard years after they were ratified." The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Vorthak's form rippled with annoyance as she called for order. In the diplomatic observation box, Earth's senior ambassador, Thomas Chen, leaned forward with intense interest. This was more than just a trial, it was humanity's first major challenge to Coalition authority since joining the interstellar community. Furthermore, Kylxna continued, her fronds pulsing with confidence, "I draw the court's attention to the Prevention of Extinction Protocol, ratified by all Coalition members, which mandates intervention when sentient species face extinction-level events. That protocol refers to natural disasters, not technological advancement." Dex then protested. "Does it?" Harrison asked mildly. "I have read the protocol in its entirety, in all 17 official Coalition languages. Nowhere does it specify the nature of the intervention required." Vorthak's form swirled with deep thoughts, the colors of her judicial authority momentarily disrupted by swirls of contemplative green. "The court will review these jurisdictional challenges before proceeding. We will reconvene in 3 standard cycles." As the chamber began to empty, Harrison caught fragments of conversation from the various diplomatic observers. Some were outraged, others intrigued, but all seemed to recognize that this trial had suddenly become something much more significant than a simple case of technological misconduct. "That was a calculated risk," Kylxna commented quietly as they gathered their materials. "The jurisdiction challenge will only delay the inevitable." Harrison smiled. "Delay is exactly what we need. While they're arguing jurisdiction, our real defense can take shape." He glanced at a data pad that showed the current status of the Nixian system. "And more importantly, it gives the Nixians time to complete their evacuation." Kylxna's fronds twitched with sudden understanding. "You never expected to win this trial traditionally." "No," Harrison admitted. "But I did expect to win it humanly, by changing the rules of the game entirely." As they left the chamber, Harrison couldn't help but notice how the light from New Saturn's rings caught the Grand Chamber's spires, making them shine like beacons. Perhaps, he thought, they weren't accusatory fingers after all, but signals pointing toward a new understanding of justice in the galaxy. What he didn't know yet was that this trial would do more than just determine his fate, it would fundamentally reshape the relationship between humanity and the Coalition, setting precedents that would echo through the centuries to come. 3 cycles passed like a slow-moving nebula, each moment heavy with tension and political maneuvering. Harrison spent the time in his quarters within the diplomatic sector of New Saturn, poring over ancient Coalition legal texts with Kylxna. The walls of the room were covered in holographic displays showing centuries of legal precedents, their soft blue glow casting ethereal shadows. "Look at this," Harrison said, gesturing to a particularly ancient document. The founding charter of the Coalition, specifically Article 3, dating back 7,000 years. It contains a fascinating contradiction. Kylxna's sensory fronds rippled with interest as she moved closer to examine the text. The translation matrix hummed softly as it converted the ancient script into modern standard. "The preservation clause," she clicked thoughtfully. "It predates even the technology sharing restrictions." "Exactly," Harrison smiled, his eyes reflecting the holographic text. "It states that all member species have an obligation to preserve sentient life wherever it may be found. No exceptions, no qualifications." Their discussion was interrupted by a soft chime. The door dissolved to reveal Ambassador Regina Walsh, Harrison's superior and mentor. Her silver hair was pulled back severely, her expression grave. "They've made their decision on jurisdiction. The trial resumes in 2 hours." The Grand Chamber seemed even more crowded than before when they returned. Species from across the galaxy had flocked to witness what was quickly becoming a landmark case. In the observation galleries, Harrison noticed representatives from several pre-coalition civilizations, their interest in the proceedings painfully obvious. Magistrate Vorthak's entrance silenced the chamber. Her gelatinous form had taken on a deeper purple, suggesting hours of intense deliberation. "This court finds that it does indeed have jurisdiction in this matter," she announced, her translated voice resonating through the chamber. "However, the defense's invocation of the Prevention of Extinction Protocol requires additional consideration." Prosecutor Dexton's scales rippled with satisfaction, but Harrison noticed a slight hesitation in the Arcturians' movements. They had planted a seed of doubt. "The prosecution will present its evidence," Vorthak commanded. Dex then rose, his ceremonial robes catching the light. "The Coalition will demonstrate that the accused deliberately and willfully provided the Nixians with Class 7 solar manipulation technology, far beyond their evolutionary stage. This action not only violated our most sacred laws but threatens the very fabric of galactic society." The prosecutor activated a holographic display, showing the Nixian system. "Observe the defendant's actions 3 stellar cycles ago. Without Coalition approval, he provided the Nixians with technology capable of stabilizing their dying sun. This level of advancement should have taken them at least another 1,000 years to develop naturally." Harrison watched as the recording played, showing his ships delivering the solar stabilization equipment. He remembered that day clearly, the desperate faces of the Nixian scientists, the calculations showing they had less than a decade before their sun went nova. But more than this singular violation, Dex then continued, his voice rising, we have evidence of a larger pattern. Communications between the accused and various other pre-coalition species, suggesting this may be part of a broader human agenda to destabilize the natural order. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. In the diplomatic box, several coalition species representatives shifted uncomfortably. Harrison remained perfectly still, his face betraying nothing. Kylxna rose, her exoskeleton gleaming under the chamber's lights. The defense would like to present a historical analysis of coalition law, beginning with the founding charter. Objection. Dex then scales flushed. The founding charter is a philosophical document, not a legal one. Overruled, Vorthak's form swirled with interest. Proceed. Kylxna activated her own holographic display, showing the ancient text Harrison had discovered. The coalition was founded on a single, fundamental principle, the preservation and protection of all sentient life. This predates all other laws, including technology sharing restrictions. She moved through the chamber, her movements deliberately precise. The prosecution speaks of natural order, but what is natural about allowing an entire species to perish when we have the means to prevent it? The founding charter doesn't distinguish between member species and non-members. It simply states our obligation to preserve life. A philosophical principle cannot override established law, Dex then protested. Can't it? Harrison stood, addressing the court directly for the first time. Your Honor, I request permission to present evidence regarding the original intent of the technology sharing restrictions. Vorthak's form swirled with multiple colors, indicating intense consideration. Granted. Harrison activated a new holographic display, showing historical records from the early days of the coalition. These restrictions were implemented after the Proximan War, specifically to prevent advanced technology from being used as weapons. They were never intended to prevent humanitarian aid. The chamber grew silent as Harrison continued, his voice clear and confident. The Nixians faced extinction not from war or conflict, but from a natural disaster, their dying sun. The technology we provided had one purpose, survival. Not conquest, not advancement, but simple survival. In the observation gallery, several members of the coalition's ethics council leaned forward, their various sensory organs focused intently on the proceedings. Harrison knew that what happened here today would set precedents that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. Furthermore, Kylxna added, her fronds pulsing with conviction, we submit that the Prevention of Extinction Protocol, combined with the Founding Charter's preservation mandate, not only permitted my client's actions but required them. To do nothing would have been the true violation of coalition law. As the second session of the trial concluded, Harrison could feel the shift in the chamber's atmosphere. What had started as a simple case of technological violation had evolved into something far more profound, a debate about the very foundations of coalition law and the true meaning of civilization. The third day of the trial began with an unexpected development that sent ripples through the assembled delegates. A delegation of Nixians had arrived to observe the proceedings, their crystalline bodies refracting light across the chamber in complex patterns that their species used to convey emotion. Their presence made the trial's stakes viscerally real, these were the lives Harrison had fought to save. Prosecutor Dex then called his first witness, Supreme Administrator Vexlor of the Technology Control Board. The ancient Regulan floated to the witness platform, his vapor form contained within an ornate environmental field. Supreme Administrator, Dex then began, his scales gleaming with confidence, please explain to the court the potential consequences of unrestricted technology sharing. Vexlor's vapor form condensed importantly. Throughout our history, we have seen countless civilizations destroy themselves by acquiring technology before they were ready. The sharing restrictions exist to prevent such tragedies. Humanity's actions threaten to unravel 50,000 years of carefully managed technological development. Harrison noticed how the administrator carefully avoided looking at the Nixian delegation. Kylxna rose for cross-examination, her fronds rippling with barely contained energy. Supreme Administrator, are you familiar with the Centauri incident of 9247? Vexlor's form wavered slightly. I fail to see the relevance. Your Honor, Kylxna pressed, the relevance will become clear. Proceed, Vorthak commanded, her gelatinous form swirling with curiosity. The Centauri incident, Kylxna continued, involved the Coalition withholding atmospheric processing technology from the Centauri colonies during the Great Solar Flare. Following Coalition protocols, naturally. How many millions died waiting for their civilization to naturally develop the necessary technology? The chamber erupted in murmurs. The Centauri incident was rarely discussed in polite company, a dark chapter in Coalition history. That was an internal Coalition matter, Vexlor protested, his vapor form agitated. Precisely, Harrison suddenly interjected, standing. The Coalition's technology restrictions led to the deaths of its own citizens. We humans reviewed this history when joining the Coalition. We swore we would never let bureaucracy supersede the fundamental right to survive. The next witness was Dr. Ixil, a renowned xenopsychologist. The insectoid scientist clicked her mandibles nervously as she testified about humanity's dangerous tendency toward unilateral action. They possess an aberrant psychology, Dr. Ixil chittered. Humans consistently prioritize immediate action over established protocols. Our studies suggest this makes them fundamentally incompatible with Coalition governance. Kylxna's cross-examination was surgical. Dr. Ixil, in your extensive studies of human psychology, did you examine the concept of moral imperative? No, we focused on decision-making patterns and risk assessment. So you analyzed how humans make decisions without studying why they make them? Kylxna's fronds pulsed with triumph. Let me submit into evidence the Earth concept of ethical obligation, the idea that the ability to help creates a duty to help. As the day proceeded, Harrison noticed a subtle shift in the chamber's atmosphere. The prosecution's parade of witnesses, meant to paint humanity as dangerous and reckless, instead highlighted a fundamental philosophical divide between human and Coalition approaches to civilization. The turning point came with the final witness, first speaker Lyra of the Nixian Science Council. Despite the prosecution's objections, Vorthak allowed her testimony under the preservation clause that Kylxna had uncovered. Lyra's crystalline form sparkled as she described her people's desperate situation. Our scientists had calculated our sun's death to the day. We had begun the mass extinction protocols, choosing which 10% of our population could fit on our limited space vessels, when Ambassador Harrison arrived. And did you request this technology? Dex then interrupted. No, Lyra's form pulsed with what translated as bitter amusement. We had accepted our fate, as the Coalition had taught us to do. Ambassador Harrison refused to accept it for us. Harrison felt the weight of the chamber's attention. Lyra continued, her crystalline form growing brighter with emotion. He showed us records of Earth's history, how humans had faced their own extinction-level events and survived through innovation and cooperation. He offered us a choice: accept death as natural, or fight for survival as sentient beings with a right to exist. In the observation gallery, several Coalition species began emitting the pheromones of deep distress. The idea of offering such a choice to a pre-Coalition species challenged centuries of established policy. As the day's session concluded, Harrison met with Kylxna in their preparation room. They're beginning to understand, he said quietly. This isn't just about technology sharing. It's about the fundamental purpose of civilization itself. Kylxna's fronds wavered thoughtfully. The prosecution has one more day of witnesses. They'll bring out their strongest arguments tomorrow. Good, Harrison smiled. Because tomorrow is when we reveal what this trial is really about. In the diplomatic quarter that evening, emergency meetings were being called as various species debated the implications of the day's testimony. The trial had evolved beyond a simple case of technological violation, it had become a referendum on the coalition's most basic principles. The fourth day of the trial began with an unexpected motion from the defense. Kylxna stood before the court, her exoskeleton gleaming under the chamber's lights, and requested permission to present evidence of conspiracy against her client. Objection. Dexthen's scales flashed brilliant red. This is a desperate attempt to distract from the defendant's clear violations. Magistrate Vorthak's gelatinous form swirled with contemplative patterns. On what grounds does the defense make this request? Harrison rose, holding a quantum data crystal. Your Honor, we have evidence that my prosecution was orchestrated by a coalition of corporate interests who profit from preventing technological advancement in developing systems. The chamber erupted in chaos. Several corporate representatives in the observation gallery began emitting stress pheromones, while others hurriedly accessed their communication devices. Order. Vorthak's translated voice boomed through the chamber. The court will hear this evidence. Harrison activated the crystal, projecting a complex web of financial transactions and encrypted communications into the center of the chamber. 3 cycles before the Nixian incident, the Galactic Development Corporation purchased mining rights to 17 systems with dying stars, including the Nixian system. The projection shifted, showing mortality projections. Their business model relied on acquiring these systems at minimal cost after their civilizations were forced to evacuate. They would then harvest the remaining resources without interference. This is outrageous. A corporate representative stood in the gallery, his mechanoid form vibrating with indignation. We categorically deny dash. The defense calls archivist Zinare of the Coalition Historical Registry, Kylxna interrupted. A small, ancient being floated to the witness stand, their bioluminescent form pulsing softly. The archivists were known for their perfect memory and unshakable dedication to historical truth. Archivist, Kylxna began, please share your findings regarding similar incidents in coalition history. In the past 1,000 cycles, there have been 73 cases of civilizations forced to abandon resource-rich systems due to astronomical phenomena. Zinare's gentle voice filled the chamber. In 68 of these cases, the systems were subsequently acquired by corporate entities who had purchased evacuation rights in advance. Harrison stepped forward. And in how many of these cases was technology that could have prevented the evacuations available within the coalition? All of them, Zinare replied simply. The chamber fell silent. In the diplomatic box, Ambassador Walsh's face showed grim satisfaction. They had just exposed a pattern of exploitation hidden behind the coalition's technology restrictions. But Harrison wasn't finished. He activated another projection, this one showing the Nixian sun, now stabilized. The technology we provided to the Nixians wasn't just about saving their civilization. It was about challenging a system that turns tragedy into profit. Dex then surged to his feet. This is irrelevant. The law regarding technology sharing is clear dash. Is it? Harrison countered. The law exists to prevent harm. Show me the harm in preventing extinction. Show me the damage caused by saving billions of lives. In the gallery, the Nixian delegation's crystalline forms pulsed with patterns that needed no translation, they were broadcasting their truth for all to see. Kylxna activated a final projection, the original treaty that established the technology sharing restrictions. The foundations of coalition law were built on preservation, cooperation, and the advancement of all sentient life. Somewhere along the way, we forgot that. We turned laws meant to protect into tools of control. Harrison addressed the court directly, his voice carrying the weight of conviction. I stand accused of violating coalition law. I contend that allowing the Nixians to die when we could prevent it would have been the greater violation. If this makes humanity dangerous, then perhaps the coalition needs a little danger, the danger of being forced to confront its own contradictions. Magistrate Vorthak's form had taken on colors never before seen in the chamber, deep, thoughtful hues that suggested profound consideration. The court will recess until tomorrow for final arguments. As the chamber emptied, Harrison noticed representatives from various corporate interests huddled in urgent discussion. They had exposed more than just a legal contradiction, they had revealed a system of exploitation hidden behind the veneer of proper procedure. In their preparation room, Kylxna's fronds rippled with concern. They will respond aggressively tomorrow. The corporations have too much to lose. Harrison nodded. That's counting on. Sometimes you have to force the darkness into the light before you can banish it. Meanwhile, in the diplomatic quarter, urgent messages were being transmitted across the galaxy. Whatever the trial's outcome, the coalition would never be quite the same. The final day of the trial dawned with an atmosphere of electric tension. The grand chamber was filled beyond capacity, with holographic observers from across the galaxy watching the proceedings. Harrison stood calmly at the defense table, knowing that the next few hours would determine not just his fate, but potentially the future of human coalition relations. Prosecutor Dex then delivered his closing arguments first, his scales shifting through patterns of righteous conviction. The law must be maintained, he declared, or we invite chaos. The accused acted unilaterally, bypassing centuries of carefully crafted regulations. If we allow such actions to go unpunished, we undermine the very foundation of coalition society. But as he spoke, Harrison noticed something had changed. The prosecutor's earlier certainty seemed hollow now, his arguments ringing false against the evidence they'd presented. The chamber's atmosphere had shifted subtly but unmistakably. When Kylxna rose for the defense's closing argument, her exoskeleton gleamed with a quiet confidence. This trial began as a simple case of technological violation. It has become something far more significant, a referendum on what the coalition truly stands for. She activated a final holographic display, showing the faces of Nixian children playing beneath their stabilized sun. Look at what we're really discussing here. Not abstract regulations, but living beings. The prosecution would have had these children sacrifice their future on the altar of procedure. Harrison stood for his final statement, surveying the chamber. When humanity joined the coalition, we made a solemn commitment to uphold its laws and principles. Today, I stand by that commitment, not to the letter of regulations twisted to serve corporate interests, but to the fundamental principles of preservation and protection of all sentient life. He paused, letting his words sink in. The real crime would have been to watch an entire civilization die when we had the power to prevent it. If that makes humanity dangerous, then perhaps the coalition needs to remember what danger truly is, not the danger of change, but the danger of becoming so rigid that we forget our purpose. Magistrate Vorthak's form had been swirling with deep contemplation throughout the closing arguments. When she spoke, her translated voice carried a weight that seemed to fill the chamber. This court has been asked to consider not just the actions of one individual, but the very principles upon which our society is built, she began. The evidence presented has revealed not only a pattern of systematic exploitation hidden behind our regulations but also forced us to confront the contradiction between our stated principles and our actual practices. The chamber held its breath as she continued. The prosecution has proven that Ambassador Harrison violated the technical restrictions on technology sharing. However, the defense has demonstrated that these violations serve the higher purpose enshrined in our founding charter, the preservation of sentient life. Her form shifted through colors never before seen in a coalition court. Therefore, this court rules that while the defendant's actions were technically in violation of specific regulations, they were in compliance with the fundamental principles of coalition law. The charges are dismissed. But Vorthak wasn't finished. Furthermore, This court orders the immediate formation of a special committee to review all technology sharing restrictions, particularly as they relate to extinction-level events. The Prevention of Extinction Protocol will be elevated to primary status, superseding corporate interests and technical restrictions. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of reactions: relief from the Nixian delegation, angry buzzing from corporate representatives, and thoughtful murmuring from coalition diplomats. Harrison remained still, accepting the verdict with the same calm he'd maintained throughout the trial. In the diplomatic box, Ambassador Walsh was already accessing her communication device, no doubt preparing to inform Earth's government of this unprecedented victory. But Harrison's attention was drawn to the Nixian delegation, their crystalline forms pulsing with patterns of joy and vindication. As the chamber began to empty, Kylxna approached Harrison, her fronds rippling with satisfaction. "You knew this would happen," she said. "Not just the verdict, but all of it, the exposure of the corporate exploitation, the reformation of coalition law." Harrison smiled. "Humanity didn't join the coalition to maintain the status quo, Kylxna. We joined to be part of something greater, and sometimes that means helping it grow, even through difficult changes." Outside the Grand Chamber, the news was already spreading across the galaxy. The verdict would be debated for years to come, but something fundamental had shifted. The coalition had been forced to confront its own contradictions and emerge stronger for it. As Harrison prepared to leave the chamber, a young Nixian approached him, her crystalline form sparkling with emotion. "You risked everything to save our world," she said simply. "We will remember." "Remember this instead," Harrison replied. "The day will come when your people join the coalition. When it does, remember that true civilization isn't about following rules, it's about knowing when to change them for the better." The trial of James Harrison had ended, but its impact was just beginning. Across the galaxy, species both within and outside the coalition began to reconsider their assumptions about law, justice, and the true meaning of civilization. And humanity, for better or worse, had established itself as a force for change in the galactic community. In the end, Harrison reflected, sometimes the most important victories aren't won through force or technology, but through the simple, human insistence that doing what's right matters more than doing what's allowed.